Stay in your lane.
Welcome to the Mind Your Own podcast with Aaron Sorensen and Sasha Durkin, where we stick to sports, except when we're not.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Mind Your Own podcast. I'm Erin.
I'm Sasha.
And I say this every week, but if you hear just a slight humming in the background, it's just now like a beautiful white noise. It is just the sound of my computer, which really should not be struggling as much as it is because it is June. So what are you going to be doing, computer, when we get to October and we are in the thick of a football, volleyball season, you name it. But here we are.
Today is the day.
Today is the day, and it's always when we get to record this podcast, so it's fine. Sasha, how are you?
I'm good. I'm in a good place today. Like, I woke up, didn't feel like, sometimes I feel like I put way too much pressure on myself. And I'm like trying not to do that, like enjoy the moment type of thing. So yeah, I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. My anxiety is at an all-time high right now. I can't tell you why. I think part of it is the atmosphere, the universe. Just it is what it is. We had like this beautiful day. It was like 75 degrees. Yeah, great. Like perfect. Spent time outside. Problem is, whenever the weather swings like that so drastically, both my allergies and my migraines flare up.
Yeah.
And if anyone wants to know what anxiety will do to you, my left side of my face is where I get my migraines, and my left gland is like swollen too. So like I can tell it's all like related. It's all the same thing. It's allergies. It's all of this stuff. Yeah. However, what I recommend is do not turn on the news and have them start talking about the COVID Delta variant, where they're saying that this variant is more prone to give you headaches, runny nose, basically everything that I was experiencing because of my allergies. So then, of course, despite the fact that I'm vaccinated, I was convinced that I have somehow contracted this Delta variant of COVID. And so anyway, that is what anxiety does. It helps you spiral into things that probably aren't true, but
I felt bad this morning because I legitimately had a little chuckle when you sent me that message because I know what that's like and it sucks so bad. I was like, I'm so sorry. Like, not only do you just like not feel like 100%, but then you throw anxiety on top of that and it just sucks.
Especially when like the news and like, y'all, I've been trying really hard to like stay, but like if you are somebody that is on the fence about getting vaccinated, get vaccinated. Please, please, please. Yeah. I think a lot about just these variants and how the vaccines are holding up against them for the most part. But like at the same time, like I just don't want to see anyone get sick. Like I just don't want to see anyone unnecessarily get so sick that like their plans are like, I want you to be able to live your life, enjoy your life. And like, I hear a lot of people who are like, I just want to live and I just want to do this stuff. And I shouldn't have to like care. And it's like, you and I actually want the exact same thing.
Right. Yeah.
So anyway, we won't go on a tangent about that, but long story short, I turned on the news and of course that was what they were talking about. And I'm like sitting there and they're like, it's headaches. I'm like, oh no. And they're like, and runny noses. I'm like, I think my nose is running just a little bit. So like, I totally did that thing where I talked to myself.
The WebMD thing. Like, don't check it.
Which those are my favorite tweets is the person who's like, I went to WebMD to see what it is. And it's like, you're either dying or it could just be like, allergies. And it's like, I guess we'll never know.
I chronically have, it doesn't matter what time of year it is. I call it puppy dog nose. It's always just like, feels like it's running and it drives me freaking crazy. But when we were in the like smack dab in the middle of this pandemic, I was just like, oh my God.
Every move.
It's happening. No, it's not. My nose does this every single day in the morning, specifically. I sneeze a lot. Yeah. The whole thing.
Just love it. Yeah, love being humans. Love having just like anxiety. Like it's just fine.
Yeah. It's great.
It's been another big week in sports. This hopefully isn't news to anyone at this point. Hopefully you've seen it. whether on Twitter or just really anywhere. Yeah. But we talk a lot about representation on this podcast. And I think, you know, the further we have gone with this podcast, that is probably one of my favorite things to talk about, because whenever, by the way, whenever I'm told to stick to sports, whenever we are told to stick to sports, it's usually, it's usually surrounding something where I'm talking about, I mean, it's literally like any social justice issue, and how it does or does not affect sports, which it's 99% of the time affecting sports. But whenever we're told to stick to sports, it's surrounding that. And so, of course, whenever somebody, any kind of news breaks, you get all of those different comments and reactions. I think I've muted enough people where I don't necessarily always see them, but I'm sure they're being said to me. Right. But on Monday, Carl Nassib, I've listened to his name and I just totally botched it. Carl Nassib, that is his pronunciation. So if you hear anyone else say it differently, I've listened to him say it, and it's fine. He became the first active NFL player to come out as gay. He shared a video on Instagram and a message basically saying, "Hey everyone, this is basically my truth. This is who I am." And it is Pride Month, so it's very timely within that. But he also made the announcement that he was going to donate $100,000 to the Trevor Project. They are an organization that provides crisis intervention services to LGBTQ plus individuals. And that was a part of his announcement. And obviously, he immediately was met with a ton of support. I retweeted JJ Watt, who said, "Good for you, Carl. Glad you feel comfortable enough to share. And hopefully someday these type of announcements will no longer be considered breaking news." Carl went to Penn State. For anybody who is a Big Ten fan, you may be familiar with him. He now plays for the Raiders. I am right in saying the Raiders, correct? Yes. By the way, I have to be, the Las Vegas Raiders. I have to be careful because similar to the Chargers, I always want to say the Oakland Raiders, but it is now the Las Vegas Raiders. It's one of those things where it was immediately met with a lot of celebration, people who were excited for Carl to live in his truth, to be able to be very open. Because the thing is, before we dive into sort of the complexity of this, and it's not complex what he announced, I want to be clear on this. I'm talking about the complexity of the response. Yes. There are a lot of young people out there now, but let me even take one step back. There are a lot of just people of all ages who now realize what's possible for them because they see somebody who is like them. Yep. Just like when we talk about women in sports and that representation, and if you can see it, you can be it. There are children out there right now who know in their hearts that they are gay, or they are, whatever, something, they feel that they are not welcome in a space because they haven't seen it in that space. The NFL has a lot of locker rooms with a lot of people on their rosters. You cannot tell me that there's only one person that identifies as LGBTQ plus. You cannot tell me. I have long had these thoughts with college football locker rooms, with NFL locker rooms, not even that, across the board. It doesn't matter. Basketball. It doesn't matter if it's a women's locker room, a men's locker room. Across the board, you cannot tell me that these teams do not have individuals within them who are gay, who are bisexual, who are, it's just not possible. Right. I'm not doing a very good job explaining this, but
no, I see. I know exactly what you're saying. Like it's kind of like that analogy where you can't expecting to dip a cup in the ocean and not have like so many particles of sand or whatever is like overglossing the fact that there are plenty of people in these locker rooms, regardless of sport, that are not comfortable or have not been comfortable coming out and identifying as a part of the LGBTQ plus community because they haven't seen it.
Right. And I mean, the thing is we find out after the fact about players who come forward and say, I am gay. Yeah. but I didn't feel comfortable sharing that when I was a part of a team. And I do feel like this is really prominent in men's sports. I feel like women have been more comfortable sharing their truth. I feel like women's locker rooms have been more open and welcome. That's not to say that they haven't been met with their own challenges and it hasn't been easy, but I think you've had more representation from women than you've had from men. And so that is what, when someone like Carl Nassib, what he is doing is going to show a world of people what's possible. So you have, you know, he played with Saquon Barkley at Penn State and he tweeted how he was proud of him. James Franklin, who I just want to point out, James Franklin has been, in my opinion, the sports aside, I don't care what you think about him as a coach. When it comes to how he has supported his players, both through everything following over the last year, when it comes to supporting his players around their response to COVID-19, his support and very openness to speaking up for his players on Black Lives Matter. Now, when he comes out, and because like this is his statement, Carl's brave announcement will forge a path for others to be true to their authentic self. I was proud of Carl when he led the nation in sacks, but I'm even more proud of him now. I commend James Franklin because I feel like here's the thing. Maybe there are athletes who feel differently that have actually had him as a coach. So I don't want to like speak if somebody had a different experience. But from my perspective, like James Franklin seems like he is a coach that has his players back, no matter who you are, no matter where you come from, no matter who you love, no matter anything. It seems like he is very comfortable and confident and he's got your back. You can be mad at James Franklin. He does not care. I've had the opportunity to meet him a number of times and he has always been very lovely and gracious and kind. So it feels like this all matches up for me. Again, understanding that like, I don't want to take away anyone else's potential experience with him. We all have different experiences with humans. I'm so excited for what this could mean for the NFL because the NFL has historically not been kind. When we talk about Black Lives Matter and the fact that Colin Kaepernick has been basically, still isn't on an NFL roster. And like, you think of like what he had to go through and the reality that the NFL is getting better in that space. It's still frustrating when you look at how someone like Colin Kaepernick was treated, but he has paved a pathway for more inclusivity. It's not perfect, but it's at least it's a step. It's a step, and he is a big reason for that step. Carl Nassib is going to be a big reason for that step. Now, I would be remiss, and I want to be very clear about this because this is something that I've seen the conversation on. Yes, we need to talk about Michael Sam too. He was the first openly gay player who was drafted in 2014. He was released during the preseason. So when we talk about first actively open player on an NFL roster, that is where but what Carl is doing today is made possible because of someone like Michael Sam. If Michael Sam hadn't lived his truth, it would not have been. But the thing is I don't like to compare too much. Like I've seen people who want to say, you know, the thing is like Michael Sam absolutely matters in this conversation. He, by the way, has actually already spoken out about this and said how proud and happy he was for Carl to be able to live his truth. But I don't want people to take away from one because of the other. These are the things is like when JJ Watt said, hopefully these things eventually don't have to become news. It's not because we shouldn't care about them. It's because
it should be normal. It
shouldn't be a big deal. It should be a thing where it's like, cool, you love who you love.
Yes, exactly. And when I say normal, I always do air quotes. People can't see me and I forget that. But like the idea of normal, like it shouldn't be like a shocking thing or something that like leads the evening or morning news. Like that's what we're talking about here, where it's like, oh, this happened, and it's not like the thing that leads into the news. Like a normal conversation, it's like, oh, sweet, cool. Like, you know, I didn't say that very well either. I'm trying to be very like, I've been doing what I can to listen because I do want to say, I don't want to speak over any, I've seen a number of
I've seen a number of Black people speak up about this and say, you know, Michael Sam deserves so much better. And because not only was he openly gay, but he also was a Black man stepping into the NFL. And there was so much that was going against him that, like, even aside from whether you felt his play matched what he did or not, or anything else, Michael Sam should have made an active roster. I will happily stand up and say that, like, I get that there are people who are arguing on Twitter about, like, well, he didn't do this or didn't do that, and so he didn't deserve to make an active roster. But the thing is there are a lot of players who are not as talented as him. Similar when you think of someone like Colin Kaepernick, there are a lot of people who somehow managed to stay within the NFL, and these athletes were not allowed to stay for whatever reason may have presented themselves. And I can already hear the person who's like, stop making it about race, stop making it about this, but it's really hard not to at least point it out. And I think that, like, a lot of times we need to step back and at least hear people when they say, hey, this thing seems suspicious. It stands out to me, especially when it's somebody who has a different world experience, different worldview than you, because even if you maybe don't understand, and I want to point out, when I saw people talking about, you know, well, Michael Sam deserves so much better, I was like, hold up, why are we, like, comparing these too much? But I got to stop myself, because I am coming from a very different point of view. I am coming from a very privileged white woman. I see things differently, and I recognize that. And so when I saw these messages, I want to be careful that we don't allow one person to take away from another, but we can understand that each person who has allowed these steps to be taken. So I think when we talk about Carl Nassib, it matters to also mention Michael Sam, and to also mention the amount of players who we'll never know about.
Right.
Who we'll never absolutely know about, that they weren't able or comfortable or felt like they would lose their careers if they came forward and spoke up. Because I think for a lot of Black athletes, from the things that I have heard and listened to, they feel they have to fit within a certain mold. They have to essentially speak a certain way. And how many times do we hear, gosh, I could go on a huge tangent about this, but my point being is that for someone like Michael Sam to not only be a Black man, but to be openly gay, he was walking into a world that in 2014 certainly wasn't probably going to be all that accepting of him. Yeah. And we're in 2021, 7 years later. And I'm going to promise you, because I've seen it on Twitter, Carl Nassib is not going to be met with all love. I have seen already the comments of people who are like, I don't give a shit. I don't care. Why is this news? What does this matter? And it's like, the funny part is why is it news? It's news because it shouldn't have to be, but it is right now, because this isn't common. Right. Because, well, and it's not common for it, the complexities are far and wide, to be honest. And it goes down to individual, like, and family, and sometimes families aren't accepting. And like, I know that the NFL has worked really hard. I'm not sure if they've done like any, I don't want to say training, but like had conversations about, hey, this is why it isn't a big deal and why it shouldn't be, and how we accept all of our players regardless of any extra, I don't even know what the words I'm looking for here. I don't want to say extracurricular, but like regardless of whatever's in their personal life, unless they're breaking the law, of course. Like that's obviously different, but I just mean like being inclusive and accepting of everybody. Yeah. And I mean, and the thing is, like, I want to read Michael Sam. So he tweeted this in response. He has two tweets in response to Carl Nassib. And he said, Carl Nassib, thank you for owning your truth, and especially your donation to the Trevor Project. LGBTQ people are more likely to commit suicide than heterosexuals. I hope and pray people will take note of this. Thank you again, Carl, and I look forward to seeing you play on the field. Then he followed it up. To anyone young or old, Black or white, straight or gay, or who are bullied by others, please know this: I stand with you in your time of need and in your hour of triumph. I am your friend. I am your brother. Even though I may never see you, hug you, or kiss you, I love you. The thing is like Michael Sam so a little bit of a personal story here, not to center this on me. There's a point here. I remember when Michael Sam came forward and shared his truth and was the first openly gay player. Like I said, he didn't end up on an active NFL roster, but he was drafted. He went through training camp. Nebraska has a former player, Eric Lueschen, who was openly gay. At the time, it wasn't like public knowledge, but when he was a part of Nebraska's roster, the team knew he was gay. And so he was actually one of the first stories I ever had the privilege to tell when I started writing about Nebraska athletics. I had this opportunity to write a story about him for Bleacher Report. And I remember CNN picked it up. And in hindsight, I wish that I had written a better story because I felt like if I could write it again, obviously my voice and tone and everything else has changed. You grow as an individual, but I'm like, dang, I sounded like a 23-year-old writer, however old I was at the time. I guess 7 years ago. Yeah. I way undershot my age. Doesn't matter. But I remember thinking about Eric, and then I remember thinking about Michael. And now I think about someone like Carl. And like we were saying, these are not the only men in NFL locker rooms or in college football locker rooms who are gay. Mm-hmm. There are many people who are not living. They don't feel comfortable living their truth within these spaces because they feel that they'll either be judged or, I mean, the comments I've seen on Twitter is people who are basically like, good luck being in a locker room now. And like, here's the thing, that is such a BS approach, because what you're doing is you're basically saying that these people who don't love the way you love have no control over how they feel.
I actually saw a TikTok on this the other day. It was from a homosexual man, and he was like walking into a locker room at a gym, and there was an older gentleman in there who the homosexual man was wearing like a pride shirt. That basically, I think it said like, I'm gay on it actually, but he walks into the locker room to, whatever. He's just going into the locker room. And this older gentleman like bristled up and like walked into a stall so that this guy couldn't see him. And he goes, I'm sorry, sir, but you're saying to me that because I'm gay, I have no impulse control whatsoever. Like, I would be interested in you in the first place, sir, is what he said. And I was just like, that's what you're saying to people when you're saying good luck being in a locker room now. You're saying that you're blanket stating that homosexuals have no control over impulse. What are you? What?
So it's not
absurd.
Aside from being like an incredibly self-centered point of view, I just want to point something out. Most of the people who give me that, most of the people I saw on Twitter yesterday when this story first broke, were white men. Yep. Sorry to the white men listening to just be so just to be so brazen with that, but that is just who it was. Yeah. That's not to say they were the only ones. Again, oh man, all that stuff. But like, okay, I'm trying to think of how I want to say this because I want to be very clear. First and foremost, that's very presumptuous of you to think that you are attractive enough that somebody, no matter how they feel about you, whether they are gay or not, that they are interested in you and all. It's implying that like you are so irresistible. Yep. Here's the thing. As a woman, I walk into spaces all of the time where men are unable to control themselves, their impulses. They feel the need to catcall or whistle or be gross. And there are times where I'm wearing absolutely the worst thing in the world. Like we're talking like baggy sweatpants, baggy sweatshirt. I've got a hat on and somebody still catcalls me. It's just ironic the amount of I almost can promise you a lot of the men who are on Twitter doing that, who are going, oh, imagine a locker room, are the same ones that are catcalling women in Target. Yep. Or catcalling them when they're walking their dogs on the street or whatever else, or make them feel unsafe.
It's the same men that think that every single woman on earth finds them irresistible. Like,
It is just bonkers to me that you can think that somebody is. I'm going to be honest with you. I have been in numbers of locker rooms with women who are. I've been in a locker room with women who I know are gay. And why does that matter?
It doesn't.
Like, why does it matter? It doesn't. Like, to assume that, like, a woman, just because she's attracted to other women, is suddenly going to be looking at me and unable to control herself. Like, come on.
Right.
Like, come on. That is what I'm saying when I talked earlier about how it feels that, like, and I want to be clear, we're not perfect as women either. We have a long way to go too, but I do feel like there is a little bit more inclusivity on the women's side. You see a lot more women who are openly living their truths and doing so very confidently, whether they feel that way every day or not. Because it's still not easy. But why are you so convinced, everyone, if you're somebody who's so uncomfortable about someone like Carl Nassib being in a locker room, why are you so convinced you haven't been in a locker room with plenty of men who are gay? Yeah. And the thing is they haven't hit on you yet. Right. So I don't get it. It's just such a, like, it's honestly, I think a lot of it is fear. I think people, when they don't understand something, they become fearful. Yep. And fear manifests in a really scary way, especially I think it manifests as hate. Yep. And it is just such a hateful way to live. I mean, I don't understand. Like, it's like the same arguments that people make when they say, like, we can't have a restroom where somebody who we can't have a transgender individual using the restroom that they identify as, because God forbid. It's always women's restrooms that people point out, by the way, because God forbid I'm in the restroom and you could be in a restroom with somebody. It's like, who cares? One, we have stalls in women's restrooms. Yeah. Do you need them in men's restrooms? Like, if y'all need them, like, we can put them up. You don't have to just be like hanging out there for everyone in public, I guess. But, like, at the same time, like, I have literally never walked into a space and felt uncomfortable. And if I have, I remove myself from that situation. But, like, and what I mean is, like, when I have felt uncomfortable, I want to be clear. The people who make me uncomfortable are typically men. Exactly. It is not like, it's just, I promise you, the people who are commenting and being negative are usually the ones that make me feel uncomfortable as a woman. And they're the same people who tell me to stick to sports. They're the same ones who think that, like, what I'm doing as far as a job is concerned is probably, like, I'm never going to find a husband and have a family because God forbid, like, I have any sense of masculinity in my life.
It's very much. And, like, I don't like, we're not blanket stating here, like, not statementing here.
Yes, not all men. We get it.
It seems like,
sorry,
in my perspective as a woman in this space, that there is a very large group of people who think the same way and are the loudest. I'm not saying they're wrong on everything, but it comes across that they are the most fearful, the least likely to be inclusive of anyone, honestly. And those are the people, when we say, like, talk to your friends, that we're talking about. Because they're always the loudest. They're always the ones that bitch the most. They're always the ones that are just wildly and accurately blanket statementing everything. Those are the people that we need to have these conversations aloud in front of.
And I think the reality is just like I was saying, and, like, I want to be clear, because I always feel like, for the record, I know I've said this before on this podcast, but I always feel like I'm, like, speaking sort of just like words are tumbling out of my mouth. And I hope that I'm speaking, I know it's not eloquent, but, like, I hope that I'm making enough of a point. But I know that I've said things on this podcast where I'm like, if I could go back and say it differently, I would. But that's the thing, is, like, I hope that the next time I speak about this topic, that I have done the work and that there is growth there. Because, like I was saying, like, as a white woman, I have a very different experience and worldview than I do not live in this world as a Black person. So like, I can't sit back and say, I understand, I get it. I just don't have that experience, that world view, that knowledge, but I can listen. And even in the times where I'm like, I don't really get it, the least I can do is just listen.
Right.
And I feel like I feel like I try to come to topics or come to places with as open of a mind as I can, knowing that I'm not perfect. But I think what is hard for me is when I feel like I'm trying to approach things from a place of love or understanding, that there are people who just don't want to. But the hard part for me is they think what they're saying is something that I need to step back and try to understand. But it's more or less like, why can't you meet me here? Why can't you come and see where I might be coming from? Like, why are you so hesitant? I guess my question is why do you fear change? Why do you fear somebody who loves differently than you, thinks differently than you, looks different than you? Why are you so fearful of things? Like when we talk about, when people go, it's not about race and about gender and it's this, but it's about who's most qualified for a job. And I'm sitting here going, yes, exactly. Right. But why are you so fearful of making it easier for a woman or of a person of color to at least be considered for a job? Like, it's this idea of like, I just cannot understand it. And I'm sorry, but it comes from a place of fear. It comes from a place of hate. It's ignorance. It's the unwillingness to see things from a different point of view and understand that like the world doesn't always operate the way that you see it. And y'all, I get uncomfortable sometimes. I follow a couple of TikTok accounts that speak very openly. So there's a trend. Anyone who listens to this podcast, I swear you're probably like, wait, where are you going with this? But just go with me for a second. There's a trend right now on TikTok of people crying. And when a certain beat drops in the song, they stop crying to show like that they can like turn it on and like make people feel really sorry. And then the second that like they don't need to, they can turn it off. This trend has become very popular with white women. And I remember the first time I saw it, I got really uncomfortable because the person who did it was a TikToker that I like and I follow. And I remember thinking like, now if you're like, why? It's because white women are dangerous with our tears. Yeah. White women tears are one of the most dangerous things when it comes to Black people and people of color. When we turn on the waterworks, which white women are really good at, people tend to believe us. Like, I am aware that, like, if I start crying, people are going to feel bad for me. Right. Like, this isn't the point, and I hate that I'm centering this, but I promise you I'm trying not to. I'm just trying to make a point. But, like, after my accident where I was hit by a drunk driver, and a lot of people were very kind, came to like step up. I remember somebody set up a GoFundMe account to help with like immediate medical expenses because you don't realize like even with insurance, that stuff doesn't kick in for a while. Yeah. I was going to be out of work for a period of time. So like, I know like people stepped up with like meal trains and all this stuff. And there was a person on the internet who made a comment that at the time, I remember I got really defensive about, and it hurt my feelings, but I see it differently now. They basically said, it's great that everyone is doing this, but y'all see you're just stepping up really strong for a white woman. And I remember getting really defensive because I didn't like go fight back with this person, but I remember in my heart, I was like, you don't know me. You don't know who I am. But then I'm almost embarrassed by my reaction to this day because I get what they're saying. Yeah. There are so many people who are facing hardships in this country that like, why did anyone care about me? I appreciate that people cared about me, and I tried very hard to thank everyone. And I try, as a result of that, to give the energy that people gave me in that experience back out into the world. I try really hard to hopefully share some of the goodness that people gave to me and go pass that on, but not just to pass it on to people that look like me, but to anybody. But I get it. I get where people were looking at me and going like, of course, like it's just another pretty white woman who's crying and people feel bad for her. And I guess my whole point in all of this is like, we have a responsibility when we have a different, like my place of privilege. I have a responsibility to use that and to stand up and speak up for people who don't have that same privilege. Like, so as a straight white woman, like I am going to speak up. If you're going to speak hatefully about someone like Michael Sam or Carl Nassib or anybody, or think of any woman who, Megan Rapinoe, who like people have, now she doesn't need anyone. She is one strong, badass woman. But like, even then it's just like, we have to be willing to be uncomfortable. We have to be willing to like step back and go, maybe not my area of expertise, maybe not something I understand, but I need to be better. I need to speak up. I need to be supportive. I need to like do better here, because this stuff is going to be news until we get to a point that it's not. Yeah. And it's it's always going to be news if we're doing this every time.
Yes, exactly.
Sorry, that was a long ass way of getting to the point of like, use your privilege wisely.
And it brings it like full circle, because that was the whole point of like, we wanted to talk about this because it's newsworthy, but the point is continuing to have these conversations so it's not as newsworthy, if that makes sense. But the reason that we're blessed in the fact that our listeners allow us the space to talk through these things and talk about these topics and hopefully normalize them. And hopefully you're having these conversations. We're not trying to like change anybody's mind, but we're trying to open up the conversation, because typically when you have conversations, it's easier to wrap your mind around the fact that maybe in your own life you're not being as inclusive as you thought you were, or you didn't realize that you were acting a certain way towards a certain marginalized group of people, whether that be people of color or people of the LGBTQ plus community or anyone really. Yeah. But having these conversations is what makes them more bunny ears normal. That is the whole point.
I love that you said bunny ears, because it's the like quotation marks. You couldn't see what she was doing, but she was doing the air quotes, and I do kind of look like bunny ears. Long story short, I think if your reaction is not, when these stories come out, to just be happy with somebody that they're getting to live the life that is true to them and is going to allow them to be authentically themselves, you have to ask yourself why. Because and I guess when I said like, use your privilege, like as somebody who, here's the thing, I want sports to be inclusive. Sports are one of the greatest unifiers. Like sports bring people together in a way that like, think of how excited, because it's this thing that brings people together. Everyone is so excited. It like makes you like, you think of all of these athletes that you're so excited to cheer for, a Katie Ledecky, or like any of the amazing women who just ran in the track and field trials. There are so many incredible people, but you think of how sports unifies people. Yeah. And sports needs to unify us. And that's why I'm saying like, use your privilege, because it can't just be comfortable for us. It can't just be safe for us. Like we need to be as inclusive as possible, because Michael Sam is right. What the Trevor Project is doing is trying to, it is amazing that Carl donated what he did to the Trevor Project, because the Trevor Project really is trying to make a difference. It's trying to help the fact that like LGBTQ plus individuals do tend to commit suicide or take their own lives at a larger rate than any of their straight counterparts. They are the world's largest suicide prevention and crisis intervention organization for LGBTQ plus youth. This is the biggest point here is if someone like Carl can save one life, where somebody now looks at him and goes, my dreams are possible. I want to play football and I want to do it at a high level. And because of him and because of Michael Sam and because of these individuals who've come before me, I can do it. It might not be easy, which is, by the way, where the rest of us come in. And I think what my overall point was is that instead of weaponizing our privilege against people, using it for good and using it to stand up for people who are not like us. Like if you are like for me as a white woman, like using my privilege to understand that like people are going to potentially trust me on subjects. So cool. I need to stand up and like say, hey, don't support this, or do support this, or I agree with this, or don't do that. But like use your voice, and it doesn't need to always be screaming on social media. I get it. But sometimes it can just be having a conversation with somebody in your house.
Yes, absolutely.
Because if these things are going to save a life and it's going to keep a kid involved in sports, it's going to take them. That's amazing. That's amazing. Like, why would we be upset with that? Why would we be upset with that? Why would we? I just don't understand, I guess, is why would you be afraid of that?
Yeah.
I
don't understand it either. We talk about a lot of things on this podcast, but I think it's super important to just keep those conversations going, because I know that even just by listening sometimes on this podcast, I stumble over my words. I don't know exactly what I'm trying to get at, but I hope that it comes across that what I'm trying to say. But even just having those kinds of conversations where you try to talk through what's going on in your head, like you discover things about yourself that maybe you didn't realize. And that's why we think it's important to continue to have these conversations.
Oh, I'm going to just tell you all this. Like, I listen back to our podcast and like, I learn a lot of this. I learn a lot from the stuff I hear myself say, where I'm like, oh, I wish I wouldn't have said it like that. Or, oh, I wish I would have said this. Or I wish I wouldn't have centered. Like, I think about like how I center things on myself a lot, which I understand is just like a human reaction is to center things. And I do a lot. Now, to be fair, this is a podcast. Like, we are sharing personal experiences at times. So like sometimes it's really hard not to have some kind of centering happening, but it is really good for me when I hear back the conversations that I'm having with Sasha, and in my opinion with all of you, because I do feel like, especially in this last year that this podcast has existed, I do feel like I have grown significantly, because conversations that I would often just have in my head or have by myself, I'm now having very openly, and there's an open documented record of what I think. And you know what? I hope that 10 years from now, when you listen to this or I listen to this, I hope that I am different then. I hope that like I have evolved and I have continued to be an ally, and I hope that I'm a better ally. If I'm exactly the same 10 years from now as I am today, I have done something wrong, because I promise you I'm a much different person today than I was 10 years ago. And that's what the goal should be, is that we should keep growing and evolving and changing. And isn't that like what we're all trying to do, is just
that's the point
make
of
the
life,
world a better place?
Yeah, for sure. No, I 100% agree with that. I'm not even the same person I was a year ago. Like, no. There's always room for growth. I don't care I really don't care who you are. Everybody has room to grow, big or small.
And you know what? We talk a lot about like, you know, stepping outside of your comfort zone and listening to things. So that's why we always appreciate everyone listening to this. And we've heard from some of you who are like, I don't always agree with everything that you're saying, but like I respect where the conversation goes, and can at least like, it challenges me a little bit. I encourage you, again, we've always said share this podcast, but I encourage you to go find podcasts that challenge, like more podcasts. Or not even a podcast, find a book that challenges your thinking. And it can be something, I'm going to just bring this up really quick. Sasha co-hosts another podcast called Meathead Test Kitchen, and it's two women, her and Sadie, talking about anything and everything when it comes to fitness, nutrition, health, mental health, all of it. And I love it, but like, I really would recommend, if you are a man listening to this podcast and you're looking for workout tips and inspiration, I'd really listen to that podcast. Now, you might sit there and go like, I don't feel super comfortable. Like, because sometimes like men don't want to listen to women speak. Please do step outside your comfort zone, because I'm going to tell you, I've learned so much from them. Like, I
appreciate that.
I use that as an example because they recently had a TikTok kind of like go viral. And they had a lot of men mansplaining things to them. That's not what our goal is here. It's not to like try to speak over people and to try to tell people like, you don't know what you're talking about. It's to listen,
Right.
to maybe listen to people who don't think like you.
Yes.
Maybe listen to people who don't look like you.
Yeah.
I don't see why that's a bad thing. And if you ultimately are like, hey, you know, like this podcast, it's not my cup of tea. Maybe it's not my thing. I don't want to, this isn't whatever. Cool. As long as you gave it a chance and
Right.
like, I don't know. I'm probably just now rambling, but that's my point. It's just like,
if you're not constantly challenging yourself, I think about this quite a bit, but if you're not challenging yourself, we're all human. We're not going to be perfect at, well, anything, to be honest with you. But the fact that you keep trying and showing up for yourself to gain knowledge for yourself and make yourself uncomfortable, like that's the only way that I've grown as much as I have in even the last 5 years of time. I really had to challenge myself. I had to be willing and open to exploring, listening to, and having conversations about things that made me uncomfortable.
yeah. I mean, even the conversation today, I feel like, y'all, if I have spoken out of turn or if I've said something incorrectly or if I've spoken about the LGBTQ plus community incorrectly, like I am so sorry. Like these are the things where I will keep learning. I know Sasha, both of us will keep learning and we will keep listening and growing. But like, I think at the end of the day, our point is always clear, is that sports are diverse and we need to be inclusive in this space, because it is not serving any of us if we try to make sports, it doesn't serve anyone if sports only looks like the world that we see.
Right.
Sports is the great unifier, but only if we allow it to be. And I think too often we chase people out of this industry, whether it's in media or the athletes themselves, because they just are coaches, because we don't give them chances, which, by the way, Becky Hammon seems like she's very likely going to be an NBA head coach here soon. Let's not scare people away from this industry. Let's not scare people away from this. Let's invite people in. Let's allow people to live in this space 100% authentically themselves, no matter what that looks like.
Yep.
And if you are somebody who, I know we say this a lot, but if you're a white man, that shouldn't be scary to you. It should just make this world more inclusive. Like that includes you.
Yes,
that includes you. It doesn't negate you. It does not take you away from this space. It includes you. It just includes a lot of people as well. That's really it. It's just making the world more inclusive. And that's really, whenever we talk about it, I know we talk about that a lot on this, but that's really my big hopes and dreams for sports, is I just want to someday look back, and when my children look at sports, they feel like anything is truly possible for them, no matter what.
Exactly. If you guys have
we'll get there.
I think that we will too. It's just like continuing to have the conversations and listening and
Were you going to give the email address?
I was. But if you guys have any questions, comments, high fives you want to send via email, you can send them to mindyourownpodcast@hailvarsity.com. You can find Aaron and I on Twitter at Aaron Sorensen and at Sasha72. I finally got it. We drop new episodes every Wednesday. Like, rate, review. It comes straight to your phone if you do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, please. And if you subscribe on Apple Podcasts, go subscribe on Spotify or go listen everywhere and, share it. And also, yes, sincerely, shoot us an email, mindyourownpodcast@gmail at hailvarsity.com. I always want to do that. And I think it's because my gut reaction, similar to like the Las Vegas Raiders and the Los Angeles Chargers, is just to always say Gmail. We have evolved. We have an @hailvarsity email address. But no, we'd love to hear from you. Is there a certain topic you want to talk about? Is there a certain guest that you'd like to have on? It doesn't even have to be necessarily sports related, because we say all the time, we're sticking to sports except when we don't really feel like it, which is a lot of times.
Right.
But yeah, let us know, because we are getting really close to 1 year of this podcast. So let's keep kicking this up a notch. What do you want to hear about? What do you feel is missing in this space? Shoot us a note, because at this point, there is no topic off limits. Let's
go. Let's go.
Well, to all of you, thank you as always for listening. We really appreciate you, and we will be back next Wednesday. And at this point, the world of sports just keeps. Oh, wait. Oh, it won't be. Maybe we'll finally talk about name, image, and likeness next week.
I know.
All right. We'll see you next week.
Bye.
A Huda Media Production.